Guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And this podcast is a business podcast where we interview entrepreneurs, business owners, thought leaders on the cutting edge. And so today I have Ryan Rigterink from leadersops.com, and he's going to talk to us about his new approach to leadership. We're going to talk about what's missing, how to correct it, fundamentals, and creating great cultures. So with that, I'm happy to welcome Ryan to the show. Welcome, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. So,
Yeah, we have this we live in a time when a lot of millennials, Gen Z, they refuse to work for companies, and the best employees, they're going to start their own companies. They found their own companies, doing some amazing work. So, there's this talent drain away from companies into other countries, other businesses, all of these. So talk about your background and what you do.
I'm in the talent development, culture transformation space. I quite honestly, kind of stumbled into it with an interest, having experienced and coached a number of people who've gone through the effects of it. Got really interested in it. Worked in a lot of different corporate environments. Some of them were great, others not as much, right? Mostly in the healthcare space, but I've actually worked across four different industries. So I've actually got really interested in my own personal journey about understanding how I'm uniquely made and what's of interest to me. So my unique design, my unique experiences, and really refining who I want to become in terms of my future intention. And so that led into a leadership philosophy called purpose management that has kind of developed into shared purpose, that then translated and ended up doing a case study with a company, a call center, and coming alongside them with one foot in the real world and one foot in, I should say, the business world and one foot in academia, and really mapping out what are the I'd say high level paradigm shifts and the processes that can take a company from a not so great culture, one where people are maybe more driven by fear than by their own intentions and what they are looking forward to, and how to actually build it from the ground up in terms of that transformation. So that was a lot of fun. My inner geek, and I know as a scientist yourself, I'm sure you love all the analytical sides of these things as well. So I definitely did deep dives into academic research and really tried to understand what are the necessary pillars of change from a leadership standpoint to actually replicate this. So
Yeah.
that brings me to today for, well, some other things, but that was basically my backdrop of how I came into what I'm doing, and it's been a riot because it's not about trying to control people. It's about how do we actually partner with who people want to become, and so it creates a sense of freedom and just people show up differently, right? So I mean, it's got to be a parallel. You talk a lot about financial freedom. It's the same kind of thing, but in the career and in who people want to become in both work and life. So
Yeah. Yeah, and what I love today, or what I love about this, is you have this. I love these mantras. You have retiring toxic work cultures, and you have fun reinventing leadership. So one question I have is, in workplace transformation, a lot of the comments I get is just platitudes, just people just speaking words but doing nothing, and just kind of looking like they're doing something on the surface. So what's the biggest
yeah.
hurdles in workplace transformation?
Yeah. So first off, just to like, I think a lot of the perceptions that are out there are often true, right? Unfortunately, for a lot of companies, I think it is platitudes, because actually making the transformation challenges pretty much what we've been taught in a lot of ways in terms of leadership. And so it's not a add this bumper sticker kind of thing and all of a sudden everything changes. It really does actually cause us to have to retool our approach on some of these things. And so I would say I mean, that's actually your question. There is the basis of why I did the case study, right? My own curiosity of okay, this I know this is real because I've experienced it for myself, but how can we do this in a culture? I mean, who grows up wanting to work in a call center, right? Nobody does that. And so if this can be created in a traditionally low meaning type of work and a high turnover employee, it's one of the most, it's industry wise, it's one of the highest turnover, right? Because it doesn't actually, people don't enjoy it typically. And so the idea was, how do we actually build the processes and how do we actually retool this in a legitimate, practical way to do this? And so I would say absolutely, it's not just pie in the sky woo. It actually changes people's lives. So one story was, one of the gals who ended up getting an opportunity to move up, was, I mean, people were basically looking for their escape of the company. They were heads down, living in fear, high rules oriented, like everything was basically being monitored either officially or unofficially. And people were just trying to last long enough to get their next thing. And it went from that to people thoroughly loving what they do and having the autonomy to actually pursue. I mean, of course, within measures of control and all of that, right? But being able to actually freely pursue and have a joint vision along with the company for what they're doing and where they're going. And so instead of these gamified rules that exist right now between employers and employees, basically brought both people to the same side of the table, and almost in a partnership fashion. How can we work together to create a really much better win-win here? And how can we do that from hiring right on through the entire employee relationship? So I don't know if I answered your question, but I tend to get passionate and start talking about a bunch of things. So feel free to
Yeah,
redirect.
it's interesting because it's you have the perspective, at the ground level. One thing that's interesting is you say that annual reviews are a waste of time and that a lot of leadership styles miss the mark. How to expand on that and how so?
Yeah, so well, let me qualify the annual review, right? So annual reviews, I don't know if they'll be retired entirely, but I think they're a really poor excuse for the primary method of evaluation and feedback, right? So one of the things that we encourage was a weekly cycle of feedback and growth. And so even if there was a so-called traditional annual review, there were zero surprises. It was never a gotcha. It was just a moment perhaps to reevaluate and put something on the calendar. But the traditional way that annual reviews are done, I think are grossly infrequent to the type of partnership that's possible. And I know why it happens. It's been a tradition for a long time. I mean, they do serve a purpose, but I would say that the way that they're done misses the mark for what's best for both sides. So, in terms of leadership, I mean, one of the paradigm shifts that I feel really needs to change, and I've seen the fruit of it changing, is that traditionally we think of hiring somebody to serve the company vision. So one of the key four paradigms is that instead of one company mono vision, two visions, the individual and the organization coming together in a either joint vision or finding the shared purpose between them is much more powerful than just one company vision. So right now you hear a lot of even current people talking about how we need to get better at communicating the company vision. Well, I'll say for a lot of companies, there's not really a compelling company vision that's going to genuinely and authentically motivate people. People are interested in where they're heading and who they want to become, what's in it for them in a sense. But what I'm helping companies and professionals do is lean more on what's in it for me and how can we actually build more value for each other in this journey. And so it's not just about having a compelling company vision. It's about how can we partner in not only the company vision, but your vision for your future.
Yeah.
Because we're here not just for our bottom line, but to help the people that are forwarding our vision. And so that really, I don't know anybody else talking about that, quite honestly. It's it may ruffle feathers, and it certainly might raise some questions, but I've seen it walked out, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And the other, kind of a follow-up question is, I've been talking to, a lot of leaders such as yourself, and they're seeing this common trend. One is either the crappy employees, they get fired, and the A employees, they leave. And so how do you stop this? And they say it's really hard to hire because it takes so much time. And when you hire it, they just either get fired or leave. So what,
Yeah.
do you think this is, and how does it relate to the Great Resignation of 2020? How do you see that playing out?
Yeah, so several questions within that. I'll do my best. Great questions, by the way.
Yeah.
So I think the Great Resignation was sort of a clarion call of we are dissatisfied with the current state of work, right? Work as it now is broken, and so it was the great reshuffling of priorities and values in search of something better. I think on a real baseline human perspective, that's what that was about, and perhaps even continues to be, as people, like you mentioned, are going into business for themselves or just searching more non-traditional W-2 structures. But what was your first question? I wanted to go back to that, but I would love to hear you like restate it so I can make sure I'm addressing it clearly.
Oh, it was basically attracting and retaining good talent because, like I said, it's very fickle. It's like a short-term employee, they go on to create a great company, or it's a short-term employee that just they can't cut it. So
Yeah,
how do you keep these great people?
yeah.
That's my
So one of the things that we retooled in this was the process of recruiting and hiring. So right now we have an entire infrastructure that of hiring and employee relationships that date back to pretty much Taylorism and the Industrial Revolution, right? And I'll tell you, I live in Michigan here. We have we hold Henry Ford in great esteem, but a lot of his earlier works are in a museum now, and I think some of the hiring practices should get retired to the museum as well. And some of that is the fact that we currently, when we interview and hire, the paradigm is we are hiring from a past present perspective on a high level, right? Somehow we have this idea that if you've done it before for somebody else, that qualifies you to do that for me as your new employer. And what that might do is give reassurance to an employer on some respects from a skill standpoint. It doesn't give any assurance, and in fact, it might undermine why people show up and the motivation and the drive that actually engages people's hearts and minds. And so, I think one of the changes, and I would say all four of the paradigm shifts that I talk about, are moving from a past present to a future present perspective. And so, even by making that shift in how we approach it, it actually highlights the fact that we don't actually have all of the data that it would be beneficial to have to hire people effectively, to actually determine good fit from both the employee side as well as the employer side. And oh, by the way, how can we create the context that someone actually is energized and motivated and a career or a journey that someone resonates with? We're not having those personalized conversations, at least not in the way that can be. And so, I mean, I don't know that I mentioned it before, and we're just talking, but I am developing a whole platform to develop this data because it's that impactful, and it can be done in a one-on-one fashion, and it can be mined out verbally in conversations and interviews, but it also can be automated, and it can provide much richer insight in both directions and create interviews that are much more meaningful and help create the foundations of what we're talking about. And so I think there's missing data. There's new approaches that I think could serve both the employer and the employee at a higher level. And it's a matter of the demand that is now. You mentioned a talent shortage.
Uh,
I have perhaps a twisted view on that. I think I'm actually really optimistic about that in the sense that employers that don't treat their people well will have a massive shortage. And if you're in a service business and you don't have employees, you don't have a business. And so that's my sort of backhanded optimism of this is sort of there's market forces at play that I think will actually cause change. And the reason I'm encouraged by it is that unfortunately a lot of times things don't change until there are market forces that sort of push them along. And so similar to how we saw adoption of remote work and hybrid work with COVID, I would like to see some of these more human approaches come into recruiting, hiring, and the whole relationship. So
yeah. I know this might be a far out question, but especially with AI, there's I've heard like a lot of companies they do like personality tests and they hire for a trial period like 3 6 months, and that kind of like decreases their risk, and kind of it prevents a lot of this turnover. And do you ever
yep.
think like this hiring, leadership, management, HR process will ever get automated, just basically eliminated, and where you can use like AI or algorithms or to kind of do that, or
Yeah.
kind of is that too far out?
No, I mean that's what we're working on. We're working on automation, and part of it could be classified as AI with a pretty strong asterisk. Like AI traditionally is thought of as open infrastructure, and not very secure. And so our approach to it is the automation and any of the AI driven stuff is containerized, secure, it's siloed and private. It's not just open and utilized for everybody's information to be out there. So
Yeah. Yeah. And then how do you, kind of, how do you see the future of work? We touched on, I think we touched a little bit on the great resignation, but what trends do you see shaping the future work, and how companies build and maintain their culture, and how should leaders prepare so that they can stay in business and stay relevant?
yeah, so I mean that's very business dependent, right? You've got actually quite a bit of even different market forces between entry level work versus more experienced work. The dynamics even of the market forces of supply and demand are quite different between the two. So depending on the business, I mean the 4-day work week in the experienced workplace is sort of catching on. It started in Europe and with some academic research behind it, and sponsored by a university there, and they're making a push for that here. I think it really is pushing on the nerve of really back to what I mentioned about Taylorism and being, we 100 years ago we used to work until the job was done. Like the whole idea of measuring work based on time is a choice, right? And we sort of think of that as the norm, and that's the way it's done, but it's not the way it's done everywhere. It's certainly not the way it's been done throughout time. And so I think part of the push behind the 4-day work week is how do we actually create value in a way that can be compensated, that doesn't actually keep employees bound to specific timeframes. And so I think that's the push behind remote work and the freedom and all the things that we've grown up thinking is just the way work is, that are really getting pushed back on. And so, I think that 4-day work week will probably work in a lot of sectors, and it probably won't work in as many or more. So I think it's, a lot of these trends you see and are getting a lot of headlines, right? I think it makes a lot of sense, but it's always context specific. So
Yeah.
I always try and bring it back to the context, because personally, I think one of the things that also needs to shift in leadership is, and they have more of this taught in business colleges in Europe than they do in the U.S., but it's the interactionist form of leadership. it's not the promotion of one size fits all. This is the right way of leadership. It's how do we equip leaders to actually react based on the context, to react appropriately, and to take the right decision making processes based on actually what is in front of us. And so we like to categorize things, right, as good and bad, and it's usually messier than that and more context dependent. So that's why I qualify some of my answers, because I don't think there's probably a one size fits all. I think there's some really good blueprints to apply differently in different organizations. And
Yeah.
yeah, what's your thoughts? What's your thoughts on that? What do you see in terms of the 4-day work week and whatnot?
Well, I think it brings up you brought up a lot of interesting ideas. It'll work in some sectors and not others. And I it really but this concept where you're basically uh working for productivity as opposed to time, because when I used to work for a company, I was like 9 to 5, and it was just kind of painful because you could finish a lot of things very quickly, and then you're just sitting there. And then and then now you have like remote and hybrid and in person, and but then you also have this new creative entrepreneurial movement where people want to do different things, and they want to
Yeah,
have more freedom. So I
definitely.
yeah. So, it's also, the question of like 4 days, if maybe you're paid a little bit less, but then you're a lot happier. You have a lot more free time with your family and all of that. So, um
Yeah.
yeah, really, I think in this day there's like so many options, and which is why I love having guests such as yourself. How can people contact you and reach out to you, follow your work, and so on?
Yeah. Yeah, you can. I'm actually really easy to find. I think I'm the only Ryan Rigterink on the planet. So, unlike a lot of names, I'm pretty easy to track down. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook. You can also go to leadersops.com, and I believe there's a way to reach out through there as well. So,
Yeah. And I really enjoyed this conversation. And for all the audience, be sure to give Ryan socials a like and follow his website and reach out to him. And with that, thanks so much for coming on.
yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate the conversation.